This program is brought to you by Rogers Xfinity, connecting you to more of what you love. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Hello, and welcome to Living Well, Giving Well on Rogers Television, Grey County. I'm Denise Reid, and along with my co-host, David Adair. He was kind enough to fill in for Fred. Fortunately, Fred couldn't be here for this episode. So coming up on today's show, we're going to have a featured partner video for Bright Shore's Soggy Memorial Hospital Foundation. This is our 34th episode of Living Well, Giving Well, and it was put together, the idea, the seed, from Stuart Reid of the Community Foundation and Willard Vanderploeg from the Bright Shores Hospital Foundations. Living well, giving well in our community. How can we do that? How can we give to people our time, our money, giving well that way? We talk a lot about volunteering, how you do your wills. Oh, we've had a variety of topics that we've been able to do. If you want to know about creating a legacy gift, you can go on to willpower.ca. We found that is a absolute...
it's an excellent resource.
Yes, sure. Resource for that. Our host charity today is the Georgian Bay Symphony, and we're very fortunate to have David with us today for that. So if you can explain a little bit about the symphony and your role there.
Yeah, so I'm David Adair. I'm the business manager of the Georgian Bay Symphony, so I look after everything that doesn't have to do with music. The symphony's been around for just over 50 years. We have about 50 volunteer musicians who come from across Grey Bruce and come together every Wednesday, sort of during the school year, to rehearse. We do 5 concerts. Like these volunteers, they do a lot of work to make that, to come together and make that music. We have a new music director, Jeffrey Pollock, who comes up on Wednesdays to run rehearsals, and he's been very good to bring the orchestra along on. He has very clear ideas of what he wants things to sound like. Yeah.
Which is good.
Yeah.
It's been a long time that the Georgian Bay Symphony's been going.
Yeah.
Which is great.
Yeah, it started
great for our community.
It started as a group that entered the Kiwanis Festival in 1972, and we've been going ever since.
Yeah. So our guest today, Dr. Colin McIvor. We appreciate you taking the time out of your, what I thought was an easy schedule, but you're still working full time.
I'm still working.
Right, we have sound. And we're going to talk about MAID. So tell us, what is MAID?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation today. This is a topic that's near and dear to me, and I'm happy to be able to provide this information. So MAID is an acronym that stands for Medical Assistance in Dying. And this comes out of legislation that's being developed over the last decade and a half primarily. This is federal legislation, and it allows people under certain circumstances to seek medical care and medical aid in dying.
That is, I'm sure, you said a decade and a half?
It's about a decade and a half,
okay.
Yeah. There's been several iterations of this as it's moved through the federal justice system. Quebec has had a leading role in advancing MAID and broadening its application in Canada. And they're actually active at the moment in another new threshold for the advancement of MAID, which has not yet been adopted by the rest of Canada, but I can talk about that later.
Yeah. So,
well, I guess, what's your background and how did you get involved with this?
So I'm a physician. I've been in Owen Sound now. This is my 40th year. I'm a radiologist. And why I'm interested in this, I think, stems out of my family. My father was a physician, British trained, and worked in Florida. And he had a very passionate belief that physicians should be able to help people when they're alive. They should also be able to help them die when the options for their care have run out and they're suffering terribly. So he was a big proponent of this, and he actually took a case in the Florida Supreme Court concerning an application for medical assistance in dying, which ultimately lost. But we had discussions for years when I was growing up about this topic. And in my training, I was exposed to people who were suffering terribly. And in fact, physicians have been helping people die surreptitiously for decades or hundreds of years. And Brompton's cocktail was a mixture of drugs initially provided in Britain, which was ostensibly given to people to relieve their pain, but everybody knew that it was going to cause their death. Yeah. And it was a mixture of opium and alcohol and cocaine and some other stuff.
Right.
So the process around physicians helping people die has been formalized in several countries in the world, including Canada. And the program is still in its evolution.
Right. So in my notes, when we were just at assessor and provider.
Right.
That's what you are?
So yes, I'm an assessor and a provider. So the regulations call for, well, let me back up a little bit. If somebody, say, thinks that they want MAID, so they may do some exploration first, they may get some information, they may decide that this is something they want to seek. They then make their wishes known to somebody, and it can be a nurse, it can be a physician, it can be a pharmacist, it can be anybody. That wish is then forwarded to our kind of main organizational head in southwestern Ontario, and they have a team there. They will assign people to interview this patient. The patient has to be seen by two independent people. They can be either physicians or nurse practitioners, but they have to be independent. They have to interview the patient. They both have to agree that this patient qualifies for MAID, and we can get into the qualifications later. So the assessors are the people that go and actually interview the patients, and then one of the assessors will be appointed as the provider, and in discussion with the patient, will set up an arrangement to provide medical assistance in dying to that patient.
And is this, so we would look at that as, okay, here's Grey Bruce is an area. So in Ontario, do we have separate groups that offer this, or is it through, you said the lead, and then they just go there?
My experience is in Grey Bruce in southwestern Ontario, and all our cases are handed to us by head office in London.
Okay.
So there's a MAID coordinator down there who has a staff, and they receive the requests from all over southwestern Ontario. And I'm primarily involved in this area. I don't take it past Thornbury, but there are providers in Collingwood, which are part of a different medical jurisdiction, and there are providers south of us as well.
So is there, like, is there types, like I would think when I'm looking at MAID, I'm thinking there'd be somebody that is definitely, they say dying of cancer. I'll go with that. And then there'd be somebody that is saying, you know what, I'm just tired of fighting, I'm tired of being sick,
right.
I'm just done. Are those two separate ideas, or you have to be
They're on
mental?
a spectrum.
Yes. Okay.
They're on a spectrum. Let me read you the actual requirements.
Okay.
Eligibility requirements. And I want to read, this is verbatim from the legislature, from the federal government. So you have to be eligible for health care in the country.
Okay.
So you, either in the province or the territory, which means that you can't be a visitor to Canada, say, and apply for MAID and get it. You have to be at least 18 years of age. Okay. You have to have what's called a grievous and irremediable medical condition. That means that it's a very serious medical condition that cannot be helped because there are no treatments available, or cannot be helped because the patient is not willing to participate in the treatments that might be available.
Okay.
So the condition is irremediable, and it has to be serious. Note, though, that that doesn't include a requirement that the illness be terminal. It does not include that.
Okay.
But it has to be grievous and irremediable. The request on behalf of the patient has to be voluntary.
Uh-huh.
They have to have enough mental capacity to make decisions regarding their health care. They don't have to have the same mental capacity they did when they were, say, 20, but they have to have enough mental capacity to understand the concepts around MAID and to make a decision regarding their health care. And they have to give informed consent to receive medical assistance in dying. And part of that informed consent is an explanation to them about other avenues of care that may be available in the community, such as palliative care, hospice care, and things like that. So that is, in a nutshell, the requirements.
So it's spelled out.
It's spelled out very carefully.
What are you finding that it's? I'm not going to say the word. I don't want to say popular.
So it's about, I think it's about 4% of deaths now in Canada. So still only a small minority of people are choosing MAID, but the growth is exponential.
Yeah.
And so I would imagine that within 10 years, I don't know what the figure would be, but I would say in 10 years, there could be 20% of the Canadian population using MAID as a way to end their life.
No. And are there medical professionals that choose not to offer?
Absolutely. This is the situation around people who want to opt out is much the same as it is for abortion, so that if a physician has a patient who asks for MAID and that physician has a moral or religious objection to it, the physician does not have to participate at all, but does have to allow the patient or even effectuate a referral to somebody else who can help them. So they can make a referral to the MAID coordinator, they can refer them to another doctor for a discussion, but they themselves don't have to participate in that decision.
It's interesting because if you do get in discussions, in the public, that there are people that are definitely for and definitely against. I sometimes think that we don't have the knowledge to do if you're there's your specific criteria and if we become more knowledgeable on it and as it becomes more available, that might be a different conversation.
So what I'm aware of is that often when somebody makes a request, the family members may initially be opposed to the request. But I find that after adequate discussion, once they appreciate the degree of suffering that the person has, and they understand what the program is about, and it's about the autonomy of the patient actually, once they understand that, I've never had a situation where the family members have not come on board and have supported the patient in that wish.
Yeah. You're watching Living Well, Giving Well on Rogers Television, Grey County, and our host charity today is Georgian Bay Symphony. We will return and get more information from Colin following our feature partner video, which is Bright Shores Saugeen Memorial Hospital Foundation.
Hello, I'm Martha Bennett, and I am board chair of the Saugeen Memorial Hospital Foundation. Our mission at Saugeen Memorial Hospital Foundation is to manage and raise funds for equipment, the facility, and staff support to ensure our community and visitors have access to the best hospital care. In order to achieve that, we really strive to come up with inspiring ways to engage our community to raise funds each year. I'm inviting everyone to join us in August for our Grand Fondo Lake Huron cycle event, and we have participants from the ages of 2 to 84. In a few short years, participants and sponsors have raised over $1.6 million. You don't have to cycle but there's other ways you can help support the foundation. It's not about giving money, sometimes it's about giving your time. And you can take part in foundation fundraiser events. You can volunteer your time with the foundation. You can share foundation information on your social media page with friends and family. With over 1,700 ER visits, 3,500 X-rays and ultrasounds, and over 500,000 lab tests annually, with your aid, we can ensure the best quality care close to home. Join us this summer to come out and cycle, or this December for our annual Light the Way Radiothon. Remember, giving is not just about making a donation, it's about making a difference. Your support does just that.
Welcome back to Living Well, Giving Well on Rogers Television, Grey County. We just saw a video from the Bright Shore Saugeen Memorial Hospital Foundation, and they're a local sponsor of the Willpower Campaign and a partner in bringing Living Well, Giving Well. One of their major fundraisers is the Grand Fondo, which is being held August 16th of this year. And it's a weekend of fun. They have cycling, street parties, Sunday kids rides, etc. So if you go on their grandfondolakehuron.ca site, you can get more information on that. I'm Denise Reid, along with David Adair and our guest, Dr. Colin McIvor. Let's continue with our conversations on MAID.
Yeah, sure. I was going to ask you, you mentioned that one of the sort of cornerstones of the legislation is informed consent.
Correct.
What about in the case of someone who is suffering from dementia?
Well, dementia is a very troublesome area at the moment in this legislation. Partly because the runway for dementia is so long, it can be years. What dementia patients really need is something called an advance directive, which would say something like, when I can no longer recognize my daughter, and I can't feed myself, and I can't do my finances, then I want to have MAID. But that may be 5, 10, 15, 20 years in the future. At the moment, advance directives are not legal in Canada, and they can't be utilized. Now, there is a mechanism that we have for patients whose death may not be imminent, but could happen at any time.
Right.
And that's called a waiver of final consent. And that works in this way. You have a disease, say a brain tumor, and it's going to kill you eventually. And it has the potential to make you incapacitated, but you don't know when that's going to happen. So in that case, I might come to you and we might discuss a waiver of final consent that's good for 6 months. And if you lost capacity in that time, and you had agreed to have MAID before, we could go ahead and carry out MAID within that period of time. When the document expires in 6 months, we could renew it for another 6 months. But that's different from an advance directive.
Yeah.
So let me give you an example. Supposing you can imagine a 65-year-old woman. She's at the top of her game. She's a high-powered lawyer. Her mother's in a nursing home. Her mother's 95, demented, doesn't know who she is, can't walk anymore, hasn't been able to communicate for years. So the lawyer says, you know what, I don't want to end up like my mother. So she says, when I can no longer identify my daughter, I want to have MAID. So flash forward 25 years, this lawyer is now demented in a nursing home. And she doesn't know who her daughter is, she can't walk. But every morning, when the food cart comes around, she gets a big smile on her face, and she loves her porridge. So who do you listen to? Do you listen to the lawyer who is 65, on top of her game? Or do you look at the lady who's now 90, who obviously enjoys having breakfast in the morning? That's a very difficult ethical decision to make.
Absolutely.
An impossible decision to make.
Absolutely.
So advance directives are not currently legal, but there is a parliamentary committee studying this concept, which will try and come up with the safeguards. But that's going to be a very difficult document to draft. And so I've seen patients who are demented, and they really have a very difficult choice to make. They have to decide to have MAID well before they become incapacitated and require MAID.
Yeah.
Because by the time they're incapacitated, they can't make that decision.
Yeah.
If they were going to become rapidly incapacitated within a couple of months, we could use a waiver of final consent.
Right.
But the runway is a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, and a waiver of final consent is not the appropriate tool. So they're unfortunately stuck between a rock and a hard place at the moment. I would hope that within the next several years, legislation will come on board, which will allow them to become more autonomous in their decision making around end of life.
Yeah. I'm sure that the legislation and all that, and they're working on that. It's got to be, I mean, you wish it worked in a faster mode, but governmental stuff usually takes a lot longer.
Right.
Do you find, and I'm going to jump from dementia, I'm going to jump to mental health.
So currently, I'll expand on this a little bit. So frequently people who are dying they have mental health issues. They may be depressed for very good reason, but their depression can't be severe enough that it's clouding their decision-making ability. If somebody has mental illness, and that's the sole reason that they're applying for MAID, they are not eligible.
Okay.
Now that came before Parliament a few years ago, and the decision was kicked down the road until at least 2027, and there's a lot of angst and disagreement amongst professionals in this, partly because of something called the social determinants of health. So for somebody, say, who is poor, maybe illiterate, maybe with a mental illness, they've been unable to work, they don't have a stable family situation, their life may be miserable. And they may be miserable enough that if they have another medical condition, they want to end their life. But that's not appropriate in this country.
Right.
So what we should do is to support these people, elevate their living standard to a place where they're not in misery from their life situation, and then allow them to make a decision about MAID. So mental health as a sole underlying cause for MAID is not legal at the moment. I don't know what the government is going to do in 2027 about this issue. It's very complicated.
Yeah.
And is that one of the, sort of like, what's the future then of MAID?
So I would think that the horizons for MAID may be expanded a little bit in the future. They've already been expanded from initially when you had to have a terminal illness to access MAID. That's no longer the case. It's been broadened a little bit. It'll probably be broadened with some form of legislation around mental health. The next thing, of course, is MAID for people under the age of 18. And that has not even been broached yet as a topic in Canada. I don't know how that would go, but there are people who are under 18 who certainly, whose life may be miserable. Young people get cancer, they suffer terribly, they have other congenital illnesses, and I can see that there may be a role at some time in the future for carefully crafted legislation that was able to assist people like that.
Well, because 18, you're not even, is that like a legal adult age?
Well, it's the legal age for this process.
Right.
I think there are a bunch of legal ages. 14 is one, 16 is another, 18 is another.
Yeah, because then that would be the parent or parents deciding whether that's going to happen. So I think it has come a long way from when it first, but I didn't honestly realize we're a decade and a half in already when I, thinking, just maybe 3, 4, 5 years ago. But that's how long, when you said, okay, so 2027 is going to be that possible, like how this procedure takes a long time.
To what?
Well, to change anything or to create
to educate
new
the public takes a long time, but I'm impressed with the knowledge that the public has about this program. And now that the information is so readily available on the internet and health practitioners know about this, people's knowledge level is surprisingly high about this.
Yeah. I took my church offered a course in MAID. So it was online, and I did it, and I printed it out, and whatever. And I was really, realized I knew nothing. And I was talking about things, when I was really not as knowledgeable as I should have been.
Right.
And honestly, I had my mother-in-law was in her 90s at the time, and I was, would this be a possibility for her?
Right.
But she was not, terminally ill and that. But when you start looking at the quality of life and the pain and the suffering that person goes through, I think that it's only human to want to have some dying with dignity.
Exactly. If I can add one more comment, and that is that if you sign up for the program and you're interviewed and you're accepted, you're not required to go through with the procedure. In fact, I would say probably 35% of people want to have MAID as an option in their back pocket because they don't know what their end-of-life experience is going to be. But they want to have it as an option if they find that the other options are not palatable.
Right.
And so that happens fairly frequently now. And I think it's a good thing because people really don't know. No one else, has experienced end of life unless you've experienced end of life. And so nobody really knows what's in the future for them if they're ill.
Right. And I would think that, interestingly, we've talked about in lots of other shows too, of how families deal with things, and sometimes it's not really good, that one thinks this and the other brother thinks, whatever. But it would be the conversation, I guess between husband and wife, but also family. Right? You need to get the family involved if that's, and have that conversation.
I'd like to get the family on board, because I think there could be a potential for recrimination and anger and guilt if the family is not on board beforehand, and the family would have to deal with this after the death of the person.
Well, and we've talked about this a lot, the communication with family, but it's always when you're talking about dying or you're talking about your wills, and that it's a very awkward conversation.
Can be.
And people don't know. But I think when you say get the families involved, and the fact that I think if they get more knowledgeable and realize how much better it is or could be for their mother, their father, or whatever.
I can tell you it's a very blissful, serene process.
Yeah.
And people simply go to sleep. It's very simple.
So if we're getting close to the end, so if anybody needed to get more information, where would they go?
Well, I would suggest if they have a GP, they talk to their GP. Or if they have a nurse practitioner, they can talk to any health professional, and they'll get referred down to the MAID coordination service. They could probably go online and find that information themselves in the area. They should not have difficulty accessing this.
Yeah, which is great. So special thanks to David for being my co-host. I also really appreciate Colin for you coming and giving us that information. I think it's a topic that we really need to be more educated on. And that concludes our edition today of Living Well, Giving Well, Grey Bruce on Rogers. I'm Denise Reid, along with David Adair. Thank you again, both of you. And join us next week on Living Well, Giving Well, when we're going to talk to Christy Leader from RBC Dominion Securities on leaving a legacy through your RSP and your RIFT. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Connect with us by visiting our website or email us at comments@rogerstv.com.
Hi, I'm Carol Merton, host of HealthLink on Rogers TV. HealthLink connects home, community, and healthcare with interesting topics and speakers about your health and your community.
Are you a passionate content creator ready to expand your audience reach? Do you have unique stories, captivating hobbies, or special interests that deserve a spotlight? Rogers TV is here to amplify your voice within the community. We offer you the platform